first, some very sad news to bring you. Former Gloucestershire and England fast bowler David "Sid" Lawrence has died at the age of 61. Lawrence was the first British-born black cricketer to represent England, and in a statement on behalf of the family, it is with great sadness that we announce the passing of Dave Lawrence, MBE, following his brave battle with motor neuron disease. Sid was an inspirational figure on and off the cricket field, and no more so than to his family, who were with him when he passed. A proud Gloucestershire man, Sid took on every challenge with everything he could, and his final contest with MND was no different. His willingness to encourage and think of others right up to the end was typical of the man he was. As president of Gloucestershire County Cricket Club, Sid took on the role with incredible pride and passion, and loved every minute of it. Sid's wife, Gaynor, and son Buster thank everyone for the kindness and support that has been shown to them and the family so far, and would ask that they are now given some time and space to grieve in private.
Now that is close, and he's got him. So Gooch's captaincy works again. Lawrence takes another wicket, his fourth, and West Indies now right on the brink at 378 for 9.
Oh, he played it on. The reward for pitching the ball up, keeping it at the batsman. What a match for David Lawrence. He removes first Desmond Haynes and second Richie Richardson.
Oh, first and last. Lawrence strikes, catches Dujan on the back foot, the ball nipped back and absolutely plumb. And got him. Lawrence is fifth. Gooch it is. He's been in the centre of everything. Richardson out for 121. West Indies bowled out for 385. Oh, and he's out. Went for one over the top, and Lawrence gets his third wicket. Well, what a way to go. Caught for 60. What a vital wicket that might be. 305 for 5. And Richards acknowledges applause on a test match ground for what he says is the final time.
He was a great man, Sid. Fierce competitor. You know, he was a sight to behold coming in with the ball in his hand. You know, great big fella. All arms and legs and power and determination. Left nothing out there on the cricket field. And yeah, he was a great friend of mine. As you said, an intimidating sight, but with a very soft, warm, you know, heart. Wonderful family, Gaynor and Buster as well, and great sense of humour. You know, crikey, we had some laughs. You know, we were laughing all the time, and would literally walk into a room. You know, and massive bloke he was. And just sort of fill the room with smiles and laughters and stories. And yeah, he was a great fella, very dear friend of mine. And yeah, very sad, obviously, thinking of Buster and Gaynor at the moment as well. But he was a fighter, but always sort of looked after the underdog, you know. He was a great lad.
Yeah, I mean, I toured with Sid, roomed with Sid, nicknamed after the bandmaster of the sort of 1930s. I'm not sure quite Sid's music, really. I've seen Sid breakdancing in a hotel in Colombo in 1985. This massive figure, just all over the dance floor. He was larger than life. And we use that a lot to talk about people, but Sid really was larger than life. And Tuff is absolutely right about the smiling and the humour, the fun. Bowling, every ball was like a massive, like a fireball, like an explosion of energy who'd come tearing in, usually with a different run up every ball. He walked back, you know, I don't know, 50 yards, and then it was just a dash, sometimes straight, sometimes there'd be an unexpected bend in it. One year he had a whistle in his run up, I seem to recall as well, and then he'd get to the crease and it would just be arms and legs and a massive, just powerful release. He was quick.
Yes.
He was quick. I mean, you knew he was going to be fast by the way he ran in, but he was quick. Because he was such a strong man. I mean, there's nothing subtle about his bowling. He just ran in and bowled fast, but always with a smile. I mean, the accuracy might not have been his forte with his bowling because there's just so much going on. But he as you said, he never left a single thing out on the field. He gave absolutely everything, and he was so proud when he was pick for England, so that would have been 88, I think, your first Test match. I toured with Sid in 84-5 on a sort of an A tour type thing to Sri Lanka, where he and I opened the bowling together in blistering conditions, and he would be tearing
sweat
I think it took him 2 games to get a wicket. He was still just hurtling in this 100 degrees, never letting up. So no, he was a dear man, I say, fiercely competitive, and although he bowled like that, it was still fun on the field. You know, still a big smile between balls, and he and Courtney Walsh are big mates, of course, the two of them together. It always sounds so trite. We talk about great blokes and stuff, but Sid really was. He was extraordinarily friendly and generous and fun. Yeah. I remember Sid for.
Did so much for the community as well in Bristol. Became the president.
Yes.
Of Gloucester.
Which you'd have been incredibly proud of.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you said, a really proud kind of man for what he could do for other people, really. He always had that sort of, thought that, it's not necessarily all about me, it's what I can do for others, really.
I was commentating when he had that horrific injury.
Yeah, I carried him off the pitch.
In New Zealand. Well, it was a dead game. It was a dead game. There was nothing on it. But that didn't bother Sid. He was still tearing in from the far end. It was a nailed-on draw, and he just was still tearing, and suddenly I was commentating with Jeremy Coney, who I've just seen around the corner. We talked about it, and suddenly you could hear it. It was the early days of pitch microphones, and they hadn't got the technology right of switching them off. So in our headphones, all we could hear was like a crack, because basically his kneecap split in half, and he hit the ground, and you could hear this terrible screams of pain and beating the ground with his fists. Robin Smith was at mid-on; he vomited. It was the most horrific injury that surely there's been in cricket, really, something like that. He was stretched off right tough as he was stretching him off. It was absolutely grotesque, and really that did finish his career. I mean, he tried to come back, but you can't get over something like that.
He was just getting going, actually, as you said. He was a little bit inconsistent and raw when he was a youngster, but I always get the credit, really, for the West Indies win at the Oval.
Oh, yes.
When I got that sixer, but then second dig I got 1 for, and he got 5 for.
He did.
So it's
good players. He got out
absolutely. Viv and everyone, and we always used to have a laugh and a chuckle about that. He was going, "Cool, blimey." He said, "I bowled him out second dig." You know what I mean? And I was very thankful for that. But that's
why that injury was cruel, because you're right. It was
just getting going
that following winter, and he had just got himself established.
Yeah.
But it was just so typical of him that in a totally dead situation in the game, nailed on draw, he would still be coming in and putting in that much effort and energy into his bowling. It was typical of him. Wouldn't want us to be sad. He lived life with us.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely. He'll be looking down with a big smile, and he'll be enjoying this game.
Well, that was Aggers and Tuffers with their memories of the England and Gloucestershire fast bowler Sid Lawrence, who has sadly died at the age of 61. And let's talk to journalist Dean Wilson, who worked closely with Lawrence over the last few months on his autobiography called In Sid's Voice, The Extraordinary Life of Dave Lawrence, which is helping to raise money for the Motor Neuron Disease Association and the Cricketers Trust, which provided support to him after his diagnosis. Dean, hello to you. I mean, goodness, I was only there on Monday at the launch of the book. Condolences to you, and you got to know Sid long before you started on the book project with him, didn't you? Tell us about your relationship with him.
Yeah, hi Ali, good afternoon. Look, we kind of got on, our personal relationship developed just over 10 years ago, and it was through a sort of a typical journalistic request. I bumped into him at an England game at Bristol, and was obviously I knew who he was, but we hadn't really kind of spoken before, and he recognised me, and said he'd read a few things that I'd done, and I was just taken with the size of him. He was, I know we've heard from Tuffers and Aggers there, just what a man mountain he was, but this was kind of quite close to his bodybuilding days, and so his muscles were just bursting out of his clothes. And we talked a little bit about the competitive bodybuilding that he was doing, and I just asked whether or not he'd be up for, doing a story about it and having some photos taken. And that really was the start of our relationship. He came down to London one afternoon, and we spent the afternoon together, going through it, telling his story. Got some great photos, and obviously showed me some clips of him on the stage, and that story really, I sort of opened up a few eyes to what he'd been up to, because a lot of people knew about the injury. He hadn't really been involved in cricket much thereafter, and this kind of brought him to the attention of a wide audience who had a lot of warmth and affection. I think he might have been a little bit surprised actually by the reaction to that story. It just kind of showed the great sort of esteem and affection he was held in, and I think that kind of started to rekindle a bit of a relationship with the game. People got in touch with him. And we stayed in touch, and our relationship developed from there. So every time England played at Bristol, we'd catch up, have a drink together, and just develop our relationship. And a few years ago, he said, he wants to write a book. He thinks he's got an interesting story to tell. Would I be interested in helping him? And of course, I was. And that's how we started the process. Of course, things changed rather markedly in the last year.
Yeah, I mean, the devastating diagnosis, first of all, and I know that you thought at the time that would probably mean the book project would be, pushed onto the back burner, but in fact that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, I was unsure, because, it's such a significant and devastating diagnosis. It's completely individual and up to that person how they react and how they kind of cope with it. And I would have completely understood if he'd turned around and said, I don't want to do this, and if he'd wanted to retreat. But credit to him, and it's that's not the type of person he was. He was very much someone who kind of faced up to challenges and was always kind of thinking about others. And yes, he wanted to tell his story, but he also really very quickly wanted to bring attention to the condition, and to try and raise awareness, raise some money through various charitable events, to try and find a cure for this really cruel disease. So yeah, quite quickly, he had a bit of time obviously trying to come to terms with the diagnosis, but yeah, soon after he called me and said, right, let's get on with it. Time is of the essence. We need to get cracking, and let's come up with a plan. So yeah, we did. We started talking every day at 10 a.m. My alarm would go off, and I'd give him a call. Some days he'd be, full of energy and enthusiastic, and want to go through various stories in his career, in his life. And on other days, he'd be feeling pretty low. Quite down about his situation, and not really want to talk too much at all. One thing I've got to give him huge credit for, when we discussed how the book would, sort of the shape of the book, he very much wanted to talk about living with MND and what it was like, and the kind of gradual degradation of his living standards and what he was able to do. And so that comes across throughout the book, and gives people a real insight into actually what this illness or what this disease does to you. So, I give him great credit for having that candour to put it in there.
Very powerfully so. He was the first British-born black cricketer to play for England. How proud was he of that as a significance, for him in the cricketing landscape and for him personally?
Well, he was proud of that, absolutely. But I think at the time, it wasn't something that he necessarily thought too much about. He was, just trying to make his way as a professional cricketer, just trying to do his best. He had some experience of racism, and very much knew who he was as a proud son of Jamaican parents, but also, incredibly proud of his Gloucester roots and being born here. And so when he played, it was just a case of trying to do the best that he could and reach, the heights of the game, the highest that he could. I think after a bit of time, after his injury, after time out of the game, and when people, I guess, were talking to him about it and reflecting on just what a trailblazer he was and what an inspiration he was, I think, he really recognised his place in cricket history, the legacy that he would leave. Of course, he's had to face up to his own mortality over the last year or so. And I think that added to his sense of pride in his achievements as a player, and then latterly as a successful business owner, as a bodybuilder, and all these other things that he's done. He has a huge amount of pride in what he managed to achieve, but it wasn't something that he consciously kind of made a big deal out of at the time.
He was a hugely proud Gloucestershire man, wasn't he? And I recall when he was at Edgbaston, wasn't he, when Gloucestershire won the T20 Blast last year, there was quite an emotional moment when James Bracey handed over the trophy to Sid, where he was there in his chair, and then of course the honour of becoming Gloucestershire club president as well.
Yeah, those moments were very, very dear and important to him, and it's kind of funny how these things work out. Gloucestershire getting to T20 finals day and then winning that trophy with Sid as president. Also doing it under the leadership of Mark Elaine, a former teammate and great friend of Sid's. He was hugely proud of Mark becoming Gloucestershire coach again and leading them to that title. I was with him that afternoon. He'd gone onto the pitch to kind of talk about his illness because he was trying to raise some money with the PCA for the Cricketers Trust. But then he kind of sat up in that box with his son and some friends around him, really just enjoying the day. I mean, I think that really was a very special day. He had a few of those while he was still able to get out and about, but he just enjoyed watching the cricket. There was a bit of concern whether or not he actually would be able to stay for the entire day, that he might get a bit tired and maybe need to leave before the end of the game. And on commentary on the TV, one of the commentators sort of mentioned it. They'd obviously panned up to him a few times and said, Sid may be on his way a bit early. And Sid, who could still talk then, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. I've come here to watch my team. I'm going to watch them right to the bitter end. I'm not going anywhere." And that was a sort of the fight and the character just coming out of him. And of course, he was right to stay and watch his team win and get that really special moment with James Bracey. I mean, it was a really classy act from James, and just sort of shows throughout all of this. I've spoken to so many people around the game and involved with the club who just got a huge amount of warmth towards Sid. I thought the way that James kind of handled that moment and just allowed him to have that special time with the trophy as president of the club, it's almost an iconic image now, and Sid was hugely proud of them all. And it was their day. He said it was, it wasn't about him, it was about the Gloucestershire players. He was very proud of them.
Very special. It does feel very poignant that his story is now in print. But Dino, thank you for being with us. Dean Wilson, a journalist who has co-written the autobiography with Sid Lawrence. It's called In Sid's Voice, The Extraordinary Life of Dave Lawrence. And our thoughts are with the family and friends of Sid, who's died at the age of 61 after that diagnosis about a year ago, motor neuron disease. Very sad news, but wonderful to be able to reflect on his life.
Well, waiting here, you've heard the sad news about David Lawrence this morning, and there will obviously be there's going to be a moment of applause here. The players are wandering out now, actually. They're going to line up, and there'll be an announcement. There's going to be some images of Sid up there on the screen. There he is, powerful leap into his bowling action. As I said earlier, it's an explosion of energy. And the players, with the umpires, are making their way out into the middle now. And with The statement I have is the ECB pays tribute to David Lawrence, a pioneering fast bowler whose career and character left an indelible mark on English cricket. Affectionately known as Sid, he rose through the bowling ranks at Gloucestershire and made his England debut in '88. Lawrence brought raw pace, aggression and a fierce competitive spirit to the international stage. His career was cut short in 1992 by a horrific knee injury sustained during a test match in Wellington, New Zealand. Off the field, Lawrence became a powerful advocate for diversity and inclusion in cricket. As the first British-born black cricketer to represent England, he used his platform to inspire future generations and challenge barriers within the sport. Please join us in a moment's applause as we celebrate the life of a trailblazer of English fast bowling and champion of inclusion, David Sid Lawrence, MBE. Very fitting. Dear old Sid, who would love to come roaring down the hill here at Headingley. I was just showing you some clips, Alistair, wasn't I? You wouldn't have seen Sid bowling, but his run-up was... especially when you're sitting in a pavilion sideways on. I remember at Cheltenham one game, sideways, and watching Sid tearing in, and you're a tail-end batsman who see this massive man hurtling in every ball. Just sort of relentless, bang, 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 you know, and always with a smile though.
Yeah, it's kind of gone up the game, hasn't it? The run-ups from angles and you show me the video clips of him making a fourth against Sri Lanka at Lords, and his run-up A was so much longer than they used to than they are now. Look at Bumrah, he's coming off once he actually starts running, probably about 8 paces, but Sid was coming from almost the boundary edge of the pavilion end with all kinds of angles and loops and lefts and rights and curves, and
he just ran, he just tore in.
Well, from the bits I saw of him, he did kind of a couple of loops, and then when he kind of, it was a bit like an aircraft coming into land, wasn't it? Like once he'd finally gone his final descent, it was full bore, wasn't it? And it was absolutely
massive leap. But it was wonderful company. So very, very lucky to have spent a lot of time with Sid.